3 men die as that IRA funeral itself becomes a terrorist target. Hello, good evening. They usually leave each other's dead alone. Now even that last decency has been blown away, and Northern Ireland confronts the prospect of a vicious new twist in what one man is prepared to do to another. As the Gibraltar bombers go to their graves, a gunman retreats, leaving a trail of death and injury. 54 are hit, 3 die. The Secretary of State makes the government's fears plain.
For some people, there will be the thought of revenge and retaliation. If that happens, this mad and awful cycle of killing and murder and violence will go on.
Tonight we report today's attack, examine the allegations that are being made about why it could happen, and look at the political options open to contain any backlash. The other headlines: gunfire in Panama brings reports of an attempted coup, but not on that country's most traumatic terrorist outrage. Its victim was the Prime Minister himself. 10 years after Aldo Moro's death, they've defeated his murderers, but failed to achieve what he stood for most: political stability. But first, 3 people die in Belfast in a gun and grenade attack at the funeral of the 3 IRA members shot dead in Gibraltar. Up to 50 mourners are wounded, 4 seriously, at the city's Milltown cemetery. The attack happened seconds after the IRA coffins were lowered into their graves. The attacker is thought to have arrived in a van on the M1 motorway near the cemetery in the Falls Road. He's thought to have crept 200 yards across wasteland behind where the mourners were gathered at the graveside. There were 3 grenade explosions and a volley of shots. An RUC station is nearby, but no police were at the funeral. As the mourners dived for cover, the attacker retreated. He was picked out running alongside a fence. A number of mourners chased after him, but he hurled another grenade to fend them off, and once again fired more pistol shots into the crowd. Later, police arrested a man said to have been captured by the crowd. Tonight, the Prime Minister is said to be shocked and appalled by the killings. The opposition leader Neil Kinnock said the attack was an appalling atrocity and called on the decent majority in Northern Ireland to stop the gunmen. And the RUC has issued a statement defending its decision to stay away from the funeral. It said paramilitary elements might have exploited its presence. Andrew Simmons reports from Belfast on the day's events.
3 coffins had arrived in Milltown Cemetery after a peaceful procession. They were to be buried in the same plot. Halfway through the graveside ceremony, the second coffin was lowered. After tributes to 23-year-old Sean Savage, his family looked on. The silence was shattered.
Get down! Get down! Everybody get down!
As appeals went out for thousands of people packing the cemetery to stay down and calm down, more grenades were thrown.
Could people please stay calm? Could people stay down and stay calm?
But the carnage continued. Crowds chased their attacker, who was also shooting with a pistol. He crouched and took aim, again shooting more of his pursuers. Some took cover behind gravestones, others didn't get the chance. Eventually, mourners from the funeral caught the attacker. The RUC took him away. The panic turned to cold shock. Children were led away, and with people still unsure of whether the graveyard was safe, the injured were taken to hospital by any form of transport available. Cars from the funeral cortege were used.
Anybody that moved along that fence or over this way, he was just firing at them.
The size of the crowd meant that there was no way that they were going to miss them. They were obviously going to shoot innocent people. We've actually recovered a pair of gloves that one of them was using.
Before the end of this funeral, 3 dead, 50 injured, 4 seriously ill. Andrew Simmons, ITN, Belfast.
Earlier this afternoon at a news conference, Gerry Adams, the president of Sinn Féin, explained why his stewards hadn't been concerned when they saw a vehicle parked on the motorway near the cemetery.
Some people presumed that it was British Army or RUC surveillance vehicle. Others thought that journalists were involved or photographers, because from that van came two people wearing casual clothes and carrying holdalls, as many of the photographers here are carrying. Now, we are asserting that to launch that attack, those involved must have had pre-notice there would be no RUC or British Army presence, as there was up until yesterday evening around these funerals. We are asserting that they had pre-notice and that there was collusion.
No organisation has claimed responsibility for today's attack. The largest legal paramilitary organisation, the Ulster Defence Association, has denied any involvement in the incident. Some observers believe there is evidence which points to the involvement of the Ulster Volunteer Force, a proscribed paramilitary group.
It show is that the type of weapons that were seized at Portadown in January and later in February in North Belfast are in circulation, some anyway. And I think the probe that the RUC is making now is how he came to get those weapons, what the link was, and who had them. They do know that the UVF have some of those type of fragmentation bombs, and also if it was a Browning pistol which was used, we won't know that until later on, that was the type of handgun which was seized both in North Belfast and at Portadown.
But we don't know, do we, where these weapons could have come from?
Immediately, no, but the RUC would believe that if it is a UVF link, that they may have come from the East Belfast area where he comes from.
The Northern Ireland Secretary, Tom King, condemned the killings as an insane and depraved attack and promised the fullest investigation. He backed the RUC's action in keeping a low profile to try to ensure the funeral went off peacefully. Mr. King, who was in Northern Ireland, also warned people against trying to seek revenge. Otherwise, he said, this mad and awful cycle of violence will go on.
It was the wish of everyone in the province that the funerals today should be conducted in a proper, peaceful manner without violence. The police had made clear that they wished this to happen, and they'd made clear their willingness to assist to make sure that that was the case. And I think certainly from the information available to me that that was indeed the case, that the funerals were proceeding in a peaceful way and without violence until this insane and depraved attack took place. Now, the position is, as we know, that there is one person in custody with the police, that the police are taking proper steps immediately for the fullest investigation to take place, and have set up immediately an incident centre to get the full facts on the matter, and these will be pursued ruthlessly to a proper conclusion. But can I just say this, that at a time of emotion, there obviously is this moment when, for some people, there will be the thought of revenge and retaliation. If that happens, this mad and awful cycle of killing and murder and violence will go on. And my simple message tonight, and obviously this doesn't anticipate whatever facts may emerge in a full investigation, but the most obvious message that needs to be understood by everybody in the province, so the message that comes out of today is the utter pointlessness and futility of violence and killing. It achieves nothing but more misery and sadness and heartache for so many. And that anybody, anywhere, in any position of responsibility or influence, has a duty in the province to see that if they can play any part in preventing retaliation, revenge, further violence, and deciding once and for all that violence is finished and that it has no part to play, this is the occasion when those people, I believe, should make their contribution. At this time when obviously there is a strong emotion, I hope those words will be listened to. They aren't words that seek to judge, to distinguish between one section of the community or another, but they're words which I believe are deeply important in the interests of every single person in this province.
The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. The MP for the mainly Catholic SDLP, Seamus Mallon, has called for the Ulster Defence Association to be outlawed. He said the action showed the latent hatred and murderous intent of loyalist paramilitaries. In the Commons, Labour's former Northern Ireland Secretary Merlin Rees asked the government to contact leaders of the paramilitary organisations. He said unless the groups asserted control, the bloodshed would go on for weeks. When he spoke to me a short time ago from Westminster, he had this message for those responsible.
The message has got to go to the leaders: cool it, because you're going to put your community at risk. And on the other side, and much more difficult, it has got to be that if you respond to this, then you too are going to lead to more people being killed. Mr. Hockey has a role in that. He met the leader of Sinn Féin the other day. He can have a word with him. There are people on the Republican side, nationalist side, who of course know who the leaders are in their area, just as it's true on the other side. And the message has got to come there too, because we are impotent in this as outsiders.
Are you advocating direct communication between the governments, north and south, and the paramilitaries on both sides?
I had direct contact in the days of the ceasefire, not by me, and I wouldn't ask for there to be direct contact in that sense, or a change in that. I am saying that the leaders of the UDA, perhaps, if that's what's happened today, have got to be told, you are responsible for your community. Unless you take control of the kamikaze who did what happened today, more of your side are going to be killed, more on the unionist, loyalist side. I'm simply asking for all those who are free with their advice to successive British governments should realize that what today has shown is that only in the community itself can they talk to people and cool it. It may not work, but we're not going to do it.
Are you saying that it's in the hands of the community rather than the hands of the security forces whether this thing now gets bigger?
The security forces can have more roadblocks, can check for arms. Yes, I am saying that what this afternoon shows, where we carried out, the security forces did, and the government, I presume, the wishes of the Republican community. Look what happened. It's over there that people have got to pull themselves together, or more Catholics, more Protestant, more loyalists, more unionists. Use whatever word you like. It's going to go on for 3, 4, 5 weeks unless someone puts a stop to it inside the community.
Well, joining us.